If I were to tell you that there was one place that you could turn to, that if you were fully invested in this environment, that you could achieve more in a single year than you could on your own in an entire lifetime, would you be interested? Well, we're going to talk about the power of the mastermind in this episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show.
Are you ready to take your message, your business, and your life to the next level?
Want to learn from someone with more than a decade of experience, training tens of thousands of people from all around the world?
Hi, Cliff. This is Pauline from Auckland, New Zealand.
John from Calgary, Alberta.
Amy Porterfield.
Michael Hyatt.
Dan here from Dunedin, New Zealand.
Ray Edwards. Mark Mason. Mike Stelzner.
Pat from Smart Passive Income.
It's Darren from Melbourne, Australia.
Now is the time to live the life of your dreams and do the work you feel most called to do in the world.
Welcome to the Cliff Ravenscraft Show.
Here's your host, Cliff Ravenscraft.
Welcome back, my friend. I can tell you right now, there has been no other investment I've made that has helped me propel the success of my business pursuits further faster than my participation in a healthy mastermind group alliance. Now, don't get me wrong. There are many other investments I've made in coaching, attending conferences, attending workshops, signing up for courses, reading, at this point, almost 1,000 different books. I will tell you, there are lots of investments I've made. I've invested in a lot of different things to propel myself forward professionally. None of them compare to the value of the investment in the environment of a healthy mastermind group alliance. Now, I was first introduced to the mastermind principle and the concept of a mastermind group back in, I think it was either 2009 or 2010, when I read Think and Grow Rich, the book by Napoleon Hill, for the very first time. Now, I will tell you right now that when I read it for the very first time, it was not the first time I had ever heard of this book. In fact, I had heard about this book for more than a decade, countless times, by people who have suggested that they would say if there was one book that is responsible for a majority of the shift, of the catalyst from going to a poverty mindset to experiencing abundance in life, the most wealthiest people I've ever met in my life, consistently, all of them said Think and Grow Rich is the one book you should start with. Now, I will tell you that I then had conversations with other people that I did life with, and many of those people had very negative things to say about the book Think and Grow Rich. They said, Cliff, you should stay away from that. It's new age philosophy. It is not biblical. It can lead you down a slippery slope of this and that. And at the time, I was very much wanting to stay pure and clear of mind, and I had a bit of fear and anxiety about reading something that so many people told me would lead me down paths that I should avoid. And so for more than a decade of hearing this book over and over again being attributed to the success of so many wealthy people in my life, I chose to stay away from it because of my fear and anxiety and the warnings that came from my community about it. Now, what shifted for me in 2009 and 2010, right around this time frame, was the fact that the way that I was thinking in this world was leading me to a life of poverty and just barely surviving in life. So much so that after my first year of full-time self-employment, even though I had the faith and the courage to leave a secure day job, after more than 12 years in a family-run insurance agency that was started by my grandfather, then owned by my father, and I was next in line to take it over. You talk about guaranteed job security. I had that. I had the faith and the courage to leave that and go. So I will say that my faith at the time served me to the level, my beliefs and my thinking at the time served me to the level of being able to have the courage to leave the day job and have the faith that I could make it as a full-time self-employed business owner. However, I was severely limited in the way that I was thinking. I had severe limitations with the beliefs that I had. Every belief that I had came with a consequence, and not a lot of those beliefs were incredibly positive when it came to thinking about money, when it came to thinking about wealth, when it came to thinking about attaining anything above and beyond what I need to survive. It just was the way that I was brought up. So for me, what happened was my first year of full-time self-employment, while it was the most fulfilling year of my life, it was also the most anxiety and stress and depression-filled year of my life. I was on a roller coaster of up and down, feeling unworthy of any income, feeling anxiety about having no income. I was in the poverty mindset at the core of my being. You know, Napoleon Hill says poverty needs no plan. And you know what? I had no real plan for accumulating wealth. I just had a desire to serve and a belief that it's just going to happen. And quite frankly, there's a lot that I could go into, but that's not the point here. What was it that shifted for me? Well, is the fact that I only made $11,000 personal net income. The business was profitable, paid for a CPA, paid for all of its own expenses, but for the first 9 months, I didn't give myself a single paycheck from these countless hours that I was putting in during the first 9 months of my business. And then after the final 3 months, after taxes, $11,000 is what I brought in. And I celebrated my first year in full-time self-employment with a 24-hour nonstop podcast marathon. And I basically wrapped it up where I was then driven to the hospital because of severe pains that were happening right around the final hour and a half to 2 hours of that 24-hour nonstop podcast marathon. And I didn't leave the hospital until about 2.5 weeks later. And the reason why is because all of that anxiety, all of that stress, all of that physical inactivity, because I sat behind a desk all day, every waking hour, not taking care of myself, having no margin for personal self-care, just going at it, work hard. And as long as you work hard, then you're worthy of income. That all that kind of stuff. And all of that drove me to such a place that I destroyed my gallbladder. And I had gallstones all throughout. I had one stuck in my cystic. I almost died in the hospital. And that kind of was my wake-up call. It's like, okay, the way that I've been thinking is over here, and it's got me these results. By this time, I've now entered a whole different sphere of influence in the world. All of a sudden, now, most of my daily interactions are no longer with people who have an employee mindset. I'm beginning to have more and more networking opportunities and connections and conversations with these people called entrepreneurs. These are the people who were hiring me to help them launch podcasts. Many of them had already experienced great success in their business pursuits. And the wealthiest of these clients began to teach me some of the things that led them to success. They said, Cliff, have you read the book Think and Grow Rich? And that book kept getting mentioned over and over again, along with a handful of other books. But Think and Grow Rich was this common theme. And at one point, I finally said, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to read this book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I began to read it. And it was incredibly challenging. For me, I found that Napoleon Hill was using language such as infinite intelligence, and it seemed like it's like, okay, here's where it's like they're not contributing or attributing to anything to God and all of this stuff, and it was just conflicting. There was like the way that I've been taught to think and perceive about God, the universe, life itself. This is really challenging for me to read this book. And I decided, how do I handle this? So I went to many of the incredibly wealthy people that were clients at the time, who also had the fruit of the Spirit, who had a very Christian way of perceiving and experiencing the world, that they also identified as Christian. And it's like, how can you, as a Christian, read this book and find this and all this other stuff? And some people said, well, I think there's many more layers in here that we could go into in this discussion, but it may serve you to have the idea of don't throw out the baby with the dirty bathwater. Okay, I would encourage you, Cliff, to just read this book and pull out of it anything that seems to resonate with you, and recognize that you don't have to accept everything in this book for what it says. If it helps you and you read infinite intelligence and you replace that word with God in your mind as you're reading, if that helps you, by all means do that. Or you can just ignore all of the spiritual advice. If you don't want any spiritual advice from this book, ignore all of that. Just look at the plans, the strategies, the frameworks, the lists of beliefs and thoughts, and take from it what you will. There's so much condensed, packed value. This man, Napoleon Hill, put decades of his life into the research, into the publication of this one book. And there's a reason why so many people have attributed their success to this book being a catalyst for that. And I'm like, okay. And I had enough people that I respected. And like I said, the fruit of their life was compassion, love, generosity, and yet they were incredibly wealthy. And so I am like, okay, I'm going to trust and I'm going to read. And it was a challenge for the first time. However, after I read that book the very first time, there was one chapter that stood out above everything else. Now, there was lots of insights that I got from this book the first time through. But chapter 10 on the power of the Mastermind group was the one chapter that literally changed everything for me. In fact, when I brought on Pat Flynn as a client back in, I think it was September of 2010, he and I were working together, and I was working on either the first time reading or a reread. I can't remember, but I had just reread chapter 10, The Power of the Mastermind of Think and Grow Rich. And I asked Pat, I said, have you read Think and Grow? Because, yeah, I've been reading it too. And I asked him if Mastermind Group, because, I've been thinking about Mastermind Group. And I asked him, would you like to start a Mastermind Group with me? He says, yes, let's do it. And so Pat Flynn and I started a Mastermind Group together in October 2010 that still operates on a weekly basis today. So that was my introduction to the book Think and Grow Rich. And it was Think and Grow Rich, chapter 10, that introduced me to the mastermind principle. And that's what convinced me to invest myself wholly into this environment, a mastermind alliance with a small group of people who would work together in perfect harmony towards a definite purpose and goal. And my life has never been the same. It is hands down the single greatest investment I've ever made of time, effort, and energy. So, what I'm going to share with you in this podcast episode is an episode that I recently produced for my Train with Cliff audio journal podcast. Now, over the years, in my Train with Cliff audio journal podcast, I have been doing a chapter by chapter commentary and analysis of the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Now, I started this just over 4 years ago, and I've been occasionally just dropping in more and more of these updates. However, there's a place you can go, such as mindsetanswerman.com, TWC archive. Link to that in the show notes. And if you go to this archive where you can see in chronological order each episode that pertains to this series, where I am giving this full commentary. And it would be mind-altering for you to hear just how much 4 years ago, where my mindset and my thought processes and my experiences were, to where I am today in this 30th update covering chapter 10 in this commentary. I actually took the episode that I recorded, unscripted, just reading everything through. I've edited it up, cleaned it up for production value purposes here for the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And what I'm about ready to share with you is that commentary just on chapter 10. Now, of course, there'll be information and insight if you want to be able to go back and listen to the prior 29 sessions of this commentary, along with my other Train with Cliff audio journal content. You can do that over at trainwithcliff.com. However, in this podcast episode, I'm now going to transition over to that edited recording so that you can hear my current up-to-date thoughts and commentary on the most influential chapter, the one chapter of the one book that has been the greatest catalyst for the number one thing that has brought the most amount of value in my professional life. The Power of the Mastermind Group, Chapter 10 of Think and Grow Rich. This is episode number 417 of the Train with Cliff audio journal podcast. I am resuming my chapter-by-chapter analysis of the book Think and Grow Rich. This is the 30th update in this series. Today, I'm finally going to get around to sharing with you my thoughts, my commentary on chapter number 10. But I do want to let you know, if you're interested in going back and listening to all of my prior updates, you can do so. They're randomly throughout the archives of this podcast. However, there is a guide that you can use. You can go to mindsetanswerman.com/TWC archive. TWC obviously stands for Train with Cliff. So mindsetanswerman.com/TWC archive. All right, here we are, chapter 10, The Power of the Mastermind. Given the fact that the Mastermind Group, the Mastermind Principle, practically one of the top, certainly the top 5, and it may be the top of the top 5, although it'd be in competition with a handful of other things, that has contributed to my success professionally more than anything else, is the Mastermind Group and the Mastermind Principle. I have been hosting and facilitating a mastermind group called The Green Room since, October 2010 with Pat Flynn. In 2012, we added 4 other guys eventually, and then we've been meeting every single week. Pat and I have been meeting every week since October 2010, and the rest of the 6 of us have been meeting every week since 2012. So I am absolutely hardwired, dedicated, committed to the Mastermind Principle in my life for, 14, it's coming on 14 years now. Then I started my own paid mastermind groups back in November 2017, and I'm pretty sure we're going on 7 years that I've been facilitating paid mastermind groups. And even before then, I hosted some one-off, one-day mastermind groups. So I'm a massive fan of the Mastermind Principle. If you want to know all of my thoughts, all of my details that are the most important, the most essential, I even created a podcast called Upgrade Your Peer Group, The Power of Mastermind Groups. There are currently, as of the date that I'm releasing this, there are 6 episodes, and the intention was that those would be the only 6. And it may still be the case, although I have contemplated the idea of going in and re-recording some of those episodes with the knowledge of the value of using that as a onboarding tool for potential new clients in the Next Level Mastermind. But if you want to hear all of my thoughts, my experiences, all of my, how do you find a mastermind group? What is a mastermind group? What's the best format? What's the best frequency? If you have all sorts of questions about how do I start my own? How much do I charge? If I'm going to, do I charge? What's the value of a free group versus a paid group? There's all sorts of stuff that I've answered, all contained with only 6 episodes over at upgradeyourpeergroup.com. This episode is not going to be me teaching my experience in mastermind groups. If you want that, go to upgradeyourpeergroup.com, or in your favorite podcast directory, simply look for Upgrade Your Peer Group, hosted by Cliff Ravenscraft, and you will find that. But I am going to cover and give you commentary on some of the things that I highlighted from Chapter 10 of Think and Grow Rich. It's titled Power of the Mastermind, the Driving Force, and the 9th Step to Riches. First thing that I have written down here, power is essential for success in the accumulation of money. So power is required if you want to successfully accumulate money. Plans are inert and useless without sufficient power to translate them into action. So you may have a plan for how you're going to come up with an income stream. You may have a strategy. You may have a framework. You may have invested lots of money in learning what you think is the right plan. You may have invested in learning the frameworks, the formulas that others have used, and you may have decided that this is my plan. And what I love about this is he's saying, listen, the whole idea that you have a plan, a strategy, a framework, a formula, that is inert, essentially lacking of power. It's pretty much useless without sufficient power or energy that can translate that plan, that framework, that formula into action. Power may be defined as organized and intelligently directed knowledge. So it's one thing to have knowledge, but to organize it and intentionally direct it towards actions. How well are you doing with the organization and the intelligent direction and focus of that knowledge? And I would even say, how much organized effort, and is that amount of organized effort, and whether or not it's intelligently directed, how much of that do you have? And power equals you have the sufficient amount of that organized effort, that intelligently directed knowledge. You have enough of that persistence, enough of that commitment, enough of that taking the results, evaluating, changing your approach, never giving up. Do you have enough of that to transmute your desire into its manifestation? That's what he is saying power is. So the question of what is power, if power is essential for success in the accumulation of money or the manifestation of any of your desires, if power is essential, what is power? Power is not knowledge. Power is not a plan. Power is not effort, but it is organized and intelligently focused effort, knowledge, so much that you have so much of that intelligently organized effort committed to action with a burning desire and a refusal to give up. That is power. If you have enough of that to where you will not give up your efforts until the realization of what you've desired has become reality, that is power. And power is required. What is required? Power. What is power? It is commitment, burning desire. It is a plan. It is knowledge, but it is organized and it's organized intelligently. The next quote in here was, organized effort is produced through the coordination of effort of two or more people who work towards a definite end in a spirit of harmony. Now, the question that I had here initially when I was highlighting this and I was putting this into my notes, why does he say two or more people? You're not limited to your own perception. You're not limited to your own belief system. You're not limited to the way that you perceive how things are. You're not limited to your perception of what is possible. You're not limited to what you believe can or should be done. Whenever you bring together two or more people, you bring about an entirely different view of reality to the table. And the two of you can bounce ideas off of each other. And that organization of the effort of the two or more is simply fascinating. You know, I think it's Ecclesiastes. Let me just see if I can go to Bible Gateway. And I want to pull up a verse here. I'm pretty sure it is Ecclesiastes 4:9. And I want actually 9 through 12. It says, two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. There's a lot in this concept of the mastermind principle that you could even find biblical backing for. In fact, later on in my notes, I'm pretty sure I made a note where Jesus says, wherever 2 or more are gathered in my name, anything they ask for will be done for them. I'll get to that quote in just a little bit. I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, the whole idea here is organized effort. If you want organized effort, if you want intelligently organized knowledge, then it will require the effort of 2 or more people. Because if you don't have at least one other person out there to help you evaluate results, you may jump to conclusions based upon your own experiences, your own filters, your own beliefs, your own thinking habits, your own way of seeing the world. And there's an infinite number of other ways that you could see the world beyond the way that you see it. And just adding one other person brings more of an intelligent approach to this. Let's move on. If power is organized knowledge, let us examine the sources of knowledge. So here are the 3 different sources of knowledge: infinite intelligence, accumulated experience, and experiment and research. So let's first go to infinite intelligence. Now, I will tell you that in the probably even when I started this in, what was that, October 2020? But when I started this, I probably was still struggling with the whole idea of calling the source of all that is the universe infinite intelligence. What's the difference between infinite intelligence and collective intelligence, collective consciousness? All of these different things. And I remember the first few times when I read this book, and this was many years ago, I found myself really getting hung up on the fact that it doesn't call infinite intelligence God. It doesn't give credit to God. And at the time, looking back now, how far I've traveled since I even started this series, I am very much still a believer in God. I have maintained a great deal of what I have learned and experienced of God and Jesus and his teachings and much of the Bible. And at the same time, I have allowed myself to explore at very deep levels the religions and faith traditions and spiritual traditions of people from all different walks of life, all different periods of time. One of my favorite books that I have read that kind of encapsulates everything was a book called History of Mysticism by Swami Abhayananda, and that's Abhayananda, Swami Abhayananda, History of Mysticism. Now, that's just one of more than 100 books that I've read on various different spiritual traditions of the past and current, and also working with people outside of religious philosophy, but even New Age philosophy and just all different ways of perceiving what life is all about, what is consciousness, what is all of these different things. And today, I'm just as comfortable with God as I've always used the language God the Father, as it's personified in much of the tradition of my Christian upbringing. And I am just as open to Divine Mother, such as what Hindus and other faith traditions would say, and the Great Spirit, all that is, infinite intelligence, the universe, the source. All of the people of the earth seem to be speaking of the same source. And from a Christian perspective, there is only one God. There are many different ways about which people go about expressing their understanding and their experiences with God, and not all of them come from a tradition that is handed down throughout the Christian biblical teachings. What I will say is I no longer have any qualms about the phrase the universe, infinite intelligence, or source energy, or anything like that. I know for me what all of that means, and it has been a journey to come to this place. And what I can say is that it has only led to even greater fruit. Because one of the concerns that I had coming from the Christian perspective that I was brought up in is that beware of false teachers and false teachings, and you will know a teacher by its fruit. And of course, it talks about the negative, the dissension, the envy, all of this other stuff. But for me, what have I experienced as a result of the expansion of my view on things of this nature and other beliefs that I've had that are far beyond the confines of a rehearsed doctrinal thesis statement from an organization? My result is greater compassion, the closest I've ever been to unconditional love, peace, joy, overwhelming sense of well-being, abundance, whatever is pure, whatever is worthy of praise, whatever is good. These are the things that my mind dwells on mostly. I find myself more in alignment with those teachings as a result of the expansion of my worldview versus what I experienced in my own life when I vigorously defended a very strict, only this language is the right language and way of seeing things. So I digress. Infinite intelligence. Now, Napoleon Hill says this source of knowledge may be contacted through the procedure described in chapter number 6. Now, it has been far too long since I covered chapter number 6. That was episode 196 of this podcast, and that was produced back on July of 2020. I just know that it had to do with imagination. So, infinite intelligence can be contacted through a procedure described in chapter 6, which is all about your imagination. So, if you're more interested in that, definitely go back to chapter 6, read, study, meditate on it. I'll get to that in just a moment. But anyway, go into depth on chapter 6 if it hasn't come to you at this point. Now, I will say that I've been practicing meditation as a result of just some shifts in my life. Matter of fact, today will be I'm looking up my Insight Timer app. Today will be my 902nd day consecutive of meditation. This is something that I do on a daily basis to get in touch with God, to pray, to meditate, to commune with, to be one with God. There is a process of where I'm putting my focused attention and my observation that is a part of this. And then, of course, I've learned other forms of meditation and visualization using creative imagination to where I can see and feel what it is that I want to create. And there's something about co-creation in that process. So there's more hinted at here. And in fact, later down in here, it's gonna talk about instructions for contacting infinite intelligence. I'm going to get to that. I have a whole section from this chapter on that. So, but basically, just to understand that if power is organized knowledge, we need to understand what is the sources of knowledge. And the first one is infinite intelligence. The second one is accumulated experience. Accumulated experience of humankind, or a portion of it, has been organized and recorded and may be found in many well-equipped public libraries. Now, of course, we have more than a well-equipped public library. We have a well-equipped, not only just like Wikipedia, but we have access to practically everything. And now, today, what we have as accumulated experience and accessing things through things like AI, it is amazing. I was the other day looking at studying for ham radio and GMRS radio. These are amateur two-way communications using the airwaves and frequencies and different modulation opportunities, that whether you're creating amplitude modulation or frequency modulation. I'm studying all of this different stuff. And the other day I was looking to program a radio and I couldn't figure out how to do this one thing. And I went to ChatGPT and I said, hey, I have such and such radio and I'm trying to figure out how to do this. And it literally gave me step-by-step instructions. Now, obviously, this thing has a well-organized library that is equipped with all sorts of knowledge. And one of those things is every single detail, every page inside of the user manual of practically every user manual that has ever existed. It's been trained on. So it knows this stuff and it's able to organize it in such a way. It's like, okay, if you're trying to do this, then follow this step-by-step procedure. While I was a brand new newbie to GMRS repeaters, and I'm using a super cheap Chinese radio that menu system hardly makes any sense whatsoever. It literally told me exactly what to do step by step. And something that I bought a couple of years ago and got frustrated with because I'm like, I'm not interested enough to figure this out right now. But then I got reacquainted and reinterested in it when I started hiking alone. And I thought, man, it'd be nice to have emergency communications. And so I pulled it back out, and finally I ran into the same issue I did before, but this time I had AI, whereas back in 2021, I did not have AI. And so rather than trying to go to a well-equipped library and searching through, what were those Dewey Decimal Systems or whatever the little index cards were, and even rather than going through a bunch of Google results or even some YouTube videos where somebody does or does not have my exact radio, I was literally able to go into ChatGPT and say, this is the exact radio I have. This is exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to connect to this repeater. Here's the information they gave to me, which has language that I don't even know what CTSS call tones are and all this stuff. I do now, but that was a couple of weeks ago. And it's like, okay, so you got this radio. They've given you this information to access the repeater, and you want to be able to program your radio so that it can do this. Here's the step-by-step instruction. It's like, what? The thing is accumulated experience is readily available at your fingertips today. There is also a third source of knowledge the book talks about, and that is experience and research. Now, it says here, in the field of science and in practically every other walk of life, people are gathering, classifying, and organizing new facts daily. By the way, my question to you is, what is your practice of gathering, classifying, and organizing new facts each day? I'm doing that through journaling. I'm doing that through reading, studying, growing, every single day. My question to you is, are you committed to an ongoing, unceasing understanding of new facts on a daily basis, and are you classifying and organizing that information? Now, I want you to know that I don't classify and organize every single new insight that comes my way, because there's the flow of that stuff is so strong. However, each day I do take the time to journal or something of that nature that is an ongoing experience for me. So occasionally, you may want to try to do something that's not readily available, and you're going to need to go out and try something yourself, see how it works, experiment, and then document what your results are. By the way, the documentation of somebody else's experience, and if you have access to that readily available, doesn't always mean that what they've concluded is, and what their results, what they interpreted from their results, doesn't mean it's actually going to be predictive of your own experience. That's something that comes to me to share. Here too, the creative imagination must be used. And when I think about this in experimentation and research, you must take what intuitively comes, the creative imagination. That creative imagination is that intuitive guidance from within. Is there some sort of inspiration? Is there some kind of idea, some kind of spark? And depending upon what your state is, it may actually be that inspiration could be coming from infinite intelligence or your connection. It could be God's voice. It could be that nudge within. Those are the sources, 3 sources of knowledge: infinite intelligence, accumulated experience, which is readily available where you can see other people's documentation. And you may need to go and experiment and research, gather new data, classify it, organize it, document it for yourself, and maybe even contribute to others by sharing it with them. It's one of the things I love to do with podcasts. All right, now it also says here, knowledge may be acquired from any of the foregoing sources. It may be converted to power by organizing it into definite plans and by expressing those plans in terms of action. So it's great that you have knowledge, but if you want to convert that knowledge into power, you must take all of the knowledge that you've acquired, organize it into a definite plan that you are going to express by taking action. Now, there's even more to it than that, but the book actually shifts over to gaining power through the mastermind. It says the mastermind may be described as coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony between 2 or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. So, taking the coordination of knowledge and effort, working in a spirit of harmony towards a definite outcome between 2 or more people. That's what a mastermind is. If you want to gain power, you can have power of taking your accumulated knowledge and organizing it intelligently and creating action towards your definite purpose. However, you increase power. You get more power. You get more accomplished if you do this through a mastermind group. Now it says, if you carry out these instructions with persistence and intelligence and use discrimination in the selection of your mastermind group, your objective will have been halfway reached before you even begin to recognize it. Meaning that with the right mastermind in place, with the right level of persistence, with the right level of definite outcome that is in harmony with everybody else, then these things are pretty much going to happen even before you might even see the manifestation of them in your reality. It's like it's basically in the scripture, it says, when you pray, do not doubt. In fact, give thanks in advance for that which you have received. The next thing in my notes here says the 2 characteristics of the mastermind principle. He talks about the economic advantages and the psychic phase. He says the economic feature is obvious. Economic advantages may be created by people who surround themselves with the advice, counsel, and personal cooperation of a group of people who are willing to lend them wholehearted aid in a spirit of perfect harmony. This form of cooperation alliance has been the basis of nearly every great fortune. Your understanding of this great truth may definitely determine your financial status. Now, he goes on to talk about how many businesses, in fact, I think we'll get to Henry Ford. Yeah, we'll get to the Henry Ford in a little bit. But the whole idea is that there's an economic advantage to having the power of a mastermind group, a board of advisors, a group of people who have determined that they are willing to wholeheartedly give you aid in the spirit of harmony towards the outcome for which you and they have agreed is a meaningful, purposeful, definite goal for which you are all committed. There's an economic advantage that could happen if you have an economic desire in sight. Now, the psychic phase. He says the psychic phase of the mastermind principle, which is more abstract, much more difficult to comprehend because it refers to the spiritual forces which the human race as a whole is not well acquainted. You may catch a significant suggestion from this statement. No two minds ever come together without thereby creating a third invisible, intangible force which may be likened to a third mind. So basically he's saying, for those who have ears to hear, let him hear. For those who have eyes to see, let him see. No two minds can come together without thereby creating a third invisible, intangible force. There's so much to that statement. And as one who is consistently engaging in one-on-one coaching conversations, I am so keenly aware of that invisible force, where things that are said and shared and insights that come, there are no experiences I've had in the past and or no knowledge that I've read or source material that I've gone to before where I'm in a coaching conversation, somebody asks me something, and then all of a sudden from within, I feel the urge to say, fill in the blank. And that fill in the blank came from some invisible, intangible force that I would not likely call coming from my ego persona and memory and database of existing accumulated knowledge that's been organized intelligently somewhere in my subconscious mind. As far as I know, that came from outside of myself. And this happens all the time when I am engaged in a one-on-one conversation where there is a spirit of harmony between me and that person, where that person is looking for clarity on how to get unstuck or how to create a plan or how to deal with a scenario or a circumstance or a situation. This has never failed. Yes, I've seen it in a group of 2 or more minds. And there's much more I could say about that, but I'm just going to drop that right there. There's a lot more to that statement than meets the eye, but I just wanted to pull this out. No two minds ever come together without thereby creating a third invisible, intangible force. I love that. All right. The energy of this power of the mastermind. The human mind is a form of energy, a part of it being spiritual in nature. When the minds of two are coordinated in a spirit of harmony, the spiritual units of energy of each mind form an affinity, which constitutes the psychic phase of the mastermind. So I want you to think about this. If I am in a group of people where my mind and their minds are all energy, and there is a spiritual nature in all of our minds, and we all come together and bring the whole of who we are in this spirit of harmony together. Not only do we bring our physical minds in harmony, but we bring our spiritual aspects of who we are in harmony. And together, we can experience oneness in purpose, oneness in intent, oneness in a creative endeavor, and bring about the manifestation of a dream into reality. We can co-create with that aspect, that spiritual aspect of our nature. Next, it says, energy is nature's set of building blocks, out of which constructs every material thing in the universe, including humankind and every form of animal and vegetable alike. Through a process that only nature completely understands, she translates energy into matter. Nature's building blocks are available to us in the energy involved in thinking. The brain may be compared to an electric battery. It absorbs energy from the ether, which permeates every atom of matter and fills the entire universe. A group of electric batteries will provide more energy than a single battery. You think about this, occasionally you buy a piece of electronics. When I was a kid, sometimes you needed 6 D-cell batteries. That's how old I was. If you only had 4 D cells and you tried to put a conductor in the place of the missing batteries, you will not have a sufficient amount of energy to power the device. By the way, each battery within itself will provide energy in proportion to the number and capacity of the cells it contains. So basically, not all batteries are created equal, and therefore not all brains are made equal. The brain functions in a similar fashion. It says, this accounts for the fact that some brains are more efficient than others, and leads to this significant statement. A group of brains coordinated or connected in a spirit of harmony will provide more thought energy than a single brain, just as a group of electric batteries will provide more energy than a single battery. So you put more brains together, and some are more efficient than others, and the output, the power of that collective brain mastermind will produce more thinking power. It will produce more energy, thought energy. Through this metaphor, it becomes immediately obvious that the mastermind principle holds the secret of the power wielded by people who surround themselves with other people of brains. I love that statement. When a group of individual brains is coordinated and functions in harmony, the increased energy created through that alliance becomes available to every individual brain in the group. This is what I love. So you may actually have somebody who had never experienced this training, this resource, this tool, but we all come together and we are all sharing our knowledge, all sharing our experience, sharing stories to back things up and all of this stuff. And now when we walk away, we all walk away richer. And what I mean, we all walk away with more organized knowledge that can be applied if we agree to put it to an intelligently organized plan backed with action. Anyway, I love this. I do have the note in here about Henry Ford. It says, Henry Ford began his business career under the handicap of poverty, illiteracy, and ignorance. So imagine that. Henry Ford starting his business with no money. He has no ability to read, and he has a great deal of ignorance he doesn't know what he doesn't know. Within the inconceivably short period of 10 years, Mr. Ford mastered these 3 handicaps, and within 25 years, made himself one of the richest men in America. Connect with that fact the additional knowledge that Mr. Ford's most rapid strides became noticeable from the time he became a personal friend of Thomas A. Edison, and you will begin to understand what the influence of one mind upon another can accomplish. Go a step further and consider the fact that Mr. Ford's outstanding achievements began from the same time he formed the acquaintance of Henry Firestone, John Burroughs, and Luther Burbank, each a man of great brain capacity, and you will have further evidence that the power may be produced through the friendly alliance of minds. There is little, if any, doubt that Henry Ford was one of the best informed men in the business and industrial world. People take on the nature and the habits and the power of thought of those whom they associate in a spirit of sympathy and harmony. Now, this can actually be a positive thing or it can be a negative thing. It depends on what is the power of thought. What is the polarity of thought? Is it a positive thought? Is it a negative thought? What is the habitual thought patterns of the people that you are harmonizing with or that you're in resonance with, that you spend the most time empathizing with? What are the habitual thought processes? Do they focus on solutions or focus on problems? Do they focus on what could go right or focus on what could go wrong? Now, it's not to say that people aren't looking at potential drawbacks, but is there a tendency to see what's possible here? Whoever it is that you're hanging out with, you will take on the nature and the habits and the power of thought of those who you associate with most. Especially if you are in a spirit of sympathy and harmony, if you're in agreement with their way of thinking. All right, Henry Ford, it says, whipped poverty, illiteracy, and ignorance by allying himself with great minds, whose vibrations of thought he absorbed into his own mind. So when you are hanging out with people, people are putting out vibrations of thought. And the question is, are you absorbing the vibrations of thought from those who you are associating with? And if you are absorbing the power of that thought, the vibrations of those thoughts, what's the polarity? Are those vibrations of thought leading those people that you're doing life with to their desired outcomes, to what you would desire for yourself? Or is it maybe time to upgrade your peer group? All right, business as a mastermind. Mr. Carnegie's mastermind group consisted of a staff of approximately 50 men with whom he surrounded himself with for the definite purpose of manufacturing and marketing steel. He attributed his entire fortune to the power accumulated through his mastermind. Next in the chapter, it says, the first and chief source of power, infinite intelligence. It says, when two or more people coordinate in a spirit of harmony and work towards a definite objective, they place themselves in position through that alliance to absorb power directly from the great universal storehouse of infinite intelligence. Okay, so we're here and we're aligned. We are committed to working together in a spirit of harmony. We're all going to get together and work towards a definite objective. We are looking for this goal. So for the Next Level Mastermind, we are a group of full-time self-employed people who are working toward a definite objective. That definite objective is increased profitability in our businesses so that we can have a business that allows us to live the lifestyle that we feel called to live so that we can have the margin to take care of ourselves personally, professionally, and spiritually so that we can experience rest and recreation and that we feel the abundance to not only take care of our own immediate needs of ourselves, our family, but also that we are able to contribute to others in meaningful and powerful ways that we all feel to contribute. So basically, the Next Level Mastermind is a small group of full-time self-employed business owners who are dedicated to a life of not surviving in business, but thriving in business. That's what the Next Level Mastermind is. When two or more people come together in a spirit of harmony, such as we do in the Next Level Mastermind, work towards a definite objective, such as what I just talked about, we place ourselves in a position through this alliance to absorb power directly from the great universal storehouse of infinite intelligence of God, that spiritual force. That is what this is saying. This is the greatest of all sources of power. It is the source to which any genius that you've ever heard of turns to. It is the source to which every great leader turns, whether they're conscious of the fact or not. Now, I told you I'd bring out Matthew chapter 18, verses 19 through 20. Jesus said this, "Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if two of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where two or three gather in my name in a spirit of harmony, there I am with them." It reminds me of Jesus' prayer in the garden when he says, "Father, I pray that they would be one. I pray that they would come together in a spirit of unity, in a spirit of harmony, in a spirit of focusing on polarity of whatever is pure, whatever is noble, whatever is holy, whatever is true, whatever is wholesome, whatever is good, whatever is praiseworthy. Let them think upon these things. Let them be united in harmony and resonance, and let them ask for these things, and it will be done for them. Let them experience this oneness, this unity, this harmony." All right. By the way, the Next Level Mastermind is not a Christian mastermind group. It does definitely have Christians in it. And there are some who have been and are now in the group who don't consider themselves to be Christians. We are a very open group, but what we experience, regardless of the terminology, is a very metaphysical, beyond the physical, beyond the material. We see miracles occur in our conversations, and as a result of that, and the coordinated, organized, intelligent planning of knowledge and plans and commitments, we see people do more in 1 year than what they could do in 10 years on their own. And that is a routine experience in a healthy mastermind group where people are properly aligned. Okay, the two other major sources from which the knowledge necessary for the accumulation of power may be obtained are no more reliable than our five senses. And by the way, these five senses that we have are not always reliable. That's not to say that they're never reliable, that they're not always reliable. However, and this is Napoleon Hill's statement, infinite intelligence does not err. So when that spiritual force brings about something, there's a knowing that comes from within, and that is clearly what I needed to hear. And then all of a sudden, the obstacle that had been in the way is obliterated. It's transmuted. It's gone. It's no longer an issue. Infinite intelligence does not err. And the mastermind principle is one of the greatest ways that you can access it. Although there are more. In fact, the next section of notes from chapter 10 of Think and Grow Rich, he says that in the future chapters, the methods by which you can contact infinite intelligence most readily will be adequately described. So in chapter 11, the mystery of sex transmutation, that's going to be a fun commentary for me to put together in my next update on this series. Chapter 12, the subconscious mind, which is, he says, is the connecting link. Chapter 13, the brain, which is a broadcasting and receiving station for thought. Chapter 14, how to outwit the 6 ghosts of fear. And then finally, chapter 15, the devil's workshop. So those remaining chapters, he says, contains even more insight and clear instruction, adequately described processes on how you can readily contact infinite intelligence. Now, he says this is not a course on religion. No fundamental principle described in this book should be interpreted as being intended to interfere either directly or indirectly with anyone's religious habits. This book has been confined exclusively to instructing the reader on how to transmute the definite purpose of desire for money into its monetary equivalent. Anyway, that is going to be some pretty interesting stuff to dive into in future updates, and I will be getting to those here in the Train with Cliff audio journal in the coming weeks ahead. Money is shy, says Napoleon Hill. He says money is shy and elusive. It must be wooed and won by methods not unlike those used by a determined lover in pursuit of a mate. And coincidental as it is, the power used in the wooing of money, is not greatly different from that used in wooing a lover. Now, more on that is going to be in that chapter titled The Mystery of Sex Transmutation, which, like I said, that's going to be an interesting chapter to cover. It says here that power, when successfully used in the pursuit of money, it must be mixed with faith, it must be mixed with desire, it must be mixed with persistence, it must be applied through a plan, and it must be set into action. Now, I can tell you right now, there have been plenty of times when I've had plans where I've had faith, and there's been plenty of plans that I've had where I've had desire, though I must agree that the ones that only ever really produce results is where the desire was actually at the highest level. Then with persistence, I've never really seen anything much in results in life without a persistence to continue on in spite of things that seem to get in the way or that might otherwise cause me to just give up. It must be applied through a plan. By the way, I actually have seen some things happen without a clear plan. Just being in a place of receiving and things just fall into place. But I must admit, there is definitely something to be said for, and I see more results when I have plans. And it says, and that plan must be set into action. Those are all the things. And this isn't just the pursuit of money. It would be the pursuit of anything that you want as far as a physical manifestation. The next section of my notes for this chapter, which stream are you in? When money comes in quantities known as the big money, it flows to the one who accumulates it as easily as water flows downhill. So basically, how hard would it be for you if you had a 5-gallon bucket to go get and accumulate 5 gallons of water from a flowing waterfall? If you can imagine that. What Napoleon Hill is saying is that money, big time money, the money truck, if you will, it comes to those who accumulate it as easily as water flows downhill. It says there exists a great unseen stream of power, which may be compared to a river, except that it flows in two directions. One side carries all who get into that side of the stream onwards and upwards towards wealth. So one stream carries you up and onwards towards wealth. The other side flows in the opposite direction, carrying all who are unfortunate enough to get into it and not able to extricate themselves from it downwards into misery and poverty. Every person who has accumulated a great fortune has recognized the existence of this stream of life. Now, here's what it's talking about. What is this stream? Now, of course, the metaphor of a river that has a flow upwards towards wealth and the flow downwards, metaphors might only get you so far, but what he's talking about is these streams consist of one's thinking process. The positive emotions of thought form the side of the stream that carries one to fortune. The negative emotions of thought form the side that carries one down to poverty. So what are your thought patterns? What are your habitual ways of thinking? That determines which stream you're in. Some people undergo the experience of alternating between positive and negative sides of this thinking stream, being at times on the positive side and at times on the negative side. This has been my own experience of life. I spent a great deal of my life on the negative side, and I have had little plugs of inspiration of thought and absorbing the thought energy of some pretty positive-minded people or positive-minded books, positive this or that, and then all of a sudden I see myself flowing, and the money and wealth and other things that I desire in life just seem to naturally show up for me fairly effortlessly, it seems, although there is usually action and plans in place, but still it just seems so natural. And then there are seasons when I revert back to some old habits of thinking and feeling, and it becomes a little bit more of a struggle. And I have recognized this, and I can say that, yeah, I definitely have undergone the alternating between these negative sides of this thinking stream. But I lean more towards the positive, and even in the midst of seeming external blockages in the flow of the stream, I still maintain a positive perspective, and I've yet to actually had any situation or circumstances where what I need has not been provided. And the only thing that keeps me from experiencing the full benefit of this upward stream of thought is just lack of clarity of a definite purpose. What do I want? What is it that I'm going after next? What is my next goal? What is my next dream? Why is it important? What is the reason for this desire? Why is this an overwhelming desire for me to move towards this? And what is the plan? And who am I going to harmonize with to help me achieve this great thing? That's the only thing at times keeping me from just swimming up that stream, even though I'm in the stream that is bringing about my needs are met and I'm not suffering where I might be suffering, just with a shift of perspective about where things are currently. But man, this over here, I feel peace, and I'm in a season where I'm deciding what is next and why, and finding that next thing. I've been there. I know what that's like. It says, if you are in the side of the stream of power that leads to poverty, this may serve as an oar by which you may propel yourself over to the other side of the stream. And really, that's all it is. The stream has a current, and all you have to do is put an oar in the water and start steering yourself metaphorically over to this other way of thinking. It can serve you only, though, as you apply this. Merely reading and or listening to these insights and passing judgment on them, whether you're agreeing with what the book says or what Cliff's commentary is or any other things that you're listening to or reading, merely reading and or listening and passing some form of judgment one way or another will in no way benefit you. There is no value in listening to this or reading this unless you, and I love this, he says, read, think, and meditate as you read. Read, think, and meditate as you read. This is one of the things that I've come to do. Not everything I consume is worthy of taking the time to think about and journal and highlight and transcribe and write my notes or podcast about or all this other stuff. But man, the number of things that I do this for, when I do it, I go in at a deep level. I read it. I pause. I highlight it. I pause. I think about it. I pause. I write it down or type it into my notes. I pause. I think about it. I pause. I write my thoughts about what it means, how it helps me reframe experiences of the past, how it helps me reframe or perceive from a different perspective my current circumstances and situations, and how it helps me filter my view of the future. Wow, meditate on this. How does this shift and alter the way that I feel? What do I think? What do I believe? Moving forward, does this break me free from some limitation that I've had in my mind on what's possible? Read, think, and meditate as you read. Soon, the entire subject will unfold, and you will see it in perspective. Now, there's a whole lot more that could be said there, but I'm going to just wrap it up here with this final little section of my notes. Poverty and riches often change places. Poverty may and generally does voluntarily take the place of riches. When riches take the place of poverty, the change is usually brought about through well-conceived and carefully executed plan. So if you're in a place of poverty and you come to a place of abundance, that change, not always, but is usually brought about through well-conceived and carefully, and I'll even add intelligently executed plans. And if you have the aid of a mastermind group, you add to the power of that. You achieve more faster. You get further faster. You avoid less mistakes, less trial, less error. More things work. This is amazing. That's the power of the mastermind. That's this whole chapter 10, the power of this mastermind. All right, it says, poverty, however, needs no plan. It needs no one to aid it because it's bold and ruthless. Riches are shy and timid. They have to be attracted. Anyone can wish for riches, and most people do, but only a few know that a definite plan plus a burning desire for wealth are the only dependable means of accumulating it. Now, I will tell you that the biggest struggle that I've seen in my own life towards accumulating wealth and abundance, it wasn't about having a definite plan. I can come up with definite plans all day, every day. The struggle that I had for so long was the idea of having a burning desire for wealth, a burning desire for a certain level of income, a burning desire for a certain amount of money for a certain purpose, a burning desire for money. There were so many hang-ups I had about that, and I'm convinced that it was that kept me from experiencing the wealth and abundance in my life. Now, there have been seasons of my life where there was a burning desire for wealth, and in my mind, a burning need for wealth. I'm thinking of the time when I learned why my wife desired to have a 2013 Honda. Well, at the time she wanted a Toyota Highlander, but we ended up buying her a brand new 2013 Honda Pilot. And the reason why she wanted a 7-passenger vehicle was so that she could be the mom who carries all of the kids on these dance team trips where they go these competitions. She wanted to be the parent who would drive and take extra girls along. She would be the chaperone. Why is that? Well, my wife was abused sexually when she was a child. And my wife has always been very much a proponent of providing safe spaces for young people, for our kids and their friends, a safe haven. And she wanted to provide that on these trips where these parents are chaperoning and driving to these different places. And when I learned not only that, but also driving home from school and stuff like that, it's just like she wanted to be the mom who plays the chauffeur to our kids and their friends. And as soon as I learned that, I'm like, how could I not want that for her? As soon as I had that burning desire to provide that for her, it was only months before I had all of the income necessary to pay for that vehicle in cash. And up to that point, I was living paycheck to paycheck. But then as soon as I had a burning desire, that burning desire was so strong that I used the mastermind principle, gathered a couple of ideas, put a plan together intelligently, and then executed and took action. And it was there. And the week that I think it was the week or week after or something like that, or within weeks of buying that car with cash, we had decided that we would put off buying a new house for a couple of years. Because this was a big expense. It took me a couple of months to pull together all this cash to pay cash for this. And then all of a sudden, through a series of events, we ended up getting introduced to this model home in a neighborhood that was a couple, let's just say 6 miles away from the house we lived in. It was more expensive than the next house up that we thought we would go to. But I came and looked at it. The basement of this home was half finished, or a quarter of it was finished. And I sat there and I saw this big open unfinished space, and I'm like, wow, I could see a workshop, like a whole-blown classroom where I could teach in-person workshops. And I could actually see this being my office down here. And I went home that night and I just couldn't sleep. My imagination, that creative imagination, that picture, the visualization. And the next day I asked Stephanie if she'd like to go back to the model home, and we're sitting down here and I'm like, I can't think about anything other than this is where I'm supposed to be doing my work. I want to create something, and it eventually became a manifestation. It was what I dreamed about, became where I'm sitting today. I'm sitting in the Next Level studio. Our basement is 800 square feet, and it's all business purpose here. It's like, this is incredible. We asked how much would it be if we did all of these things, because we dreamed what we would do in this house, and it was all upgrades. And the price tag was pretty huge. We never wanted to do the whole PMI mortgage interest thing, insurance thing. We wanted to do a whole 20% down. They said, listen, you're going to need $63,000 to close if you want to be able to do a traditional loan. And I'm like, okay, $63,000 is what we need down. She says, but you only need $1,000 deposit. Now, here's the situation. At that moment, we had $1,000 we could easily write the check for, and they could go cash it, no big deal. By the way, did I mention that we were on our way to a cruise, a Disney cruise with our podcast community? Right? The day that we dropped the check off, we literally were leaving that day for a road trip in our 2013 Honda Pilot to travel all the way to Florida for a 7-day cruise, but we were gone for 10 days because of the drive down and the drive back. But anyway, we were going for this cruise. We drop off a check, and now I drop off this check, I sign a contract, and I said to them, I will have $62,000 cash after taxes within 9 months by the time this house is completed to give to you to close on this house. I did not have those funds when I signed that contract, but I knew that I would, because then I had a burning desire. And now I had a contract that gave me that motivation. And I have a belief system that I always honor my financial commitments. And then I went and organized my plans intelligently through the use of my mastermind group, came up with a plan. I definitely committed myself to the plan, but also executed on it over and over and over again. And it was the first year in my business where I went from like $240,000 to $300,000 per year on average. And that year, as a result of this, my business generated $750,000 in one 12-month period of time. And all of that was because of a burning desire for that amount of income. And by the way, the burning desire for that amount of income has not been there since, nor has the $750,000 years. Don't get me wrong, I live in an incredibly abundant lifestyle. I'm very happy with where I've lived over these last few years, been very comfortable, although I have noticed in the past year, which stream am I in here? And I've been bouncing from one stream to the other, some going up, some going down on the financial thought side of things. And one of the reasons why I'm like, you know what, it's time for me to get back in here. It's time for me to finish up this series on Think and Grow Rich. And I have ideas for some other books that I'm going to jump back into and or start here in the Train with Cliff audio journal. So this wraps it up. This is my commentary. These are just my off-the-cuff, top-of-mind thoughts. All I did was I read and outlined Chapter 10 right before I started this episode. And then I just went through my Notion document where I had copied and pasted all of my highlights, and I just shared with you all the things that have come up with it. By the way, I am going to put this out as an episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. For those of you who are listening to this via the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, this podcast is called the Train with Cliff Audio Journal Podcast. This is episode number 417 of that podcast. And there are 29 prior updates, which you can see over at mindsetanswerman.com/TWC archive. and you can see all of the content that is listed there. And of course, not all of the content, but you'll see some highlights of things you might be interested in. It is a paid premium podcast, and occasionally I bring an episode over here to the Cliff Ravenscraft Show for you to hear. If you're interested, you can go over to trainwithcliff.com. Again, that is trainwithcliff.com. And before I leave, if you are a full-time self-employed business owner and you are not in a powerful mastermind group that is getting you significant results towards the life you desire to experience on an ongoing, consistent basis, if you'd like to benefit from the power and the forces of what is possible through the alliance of people working together with you in a spirit of perfect harmony, if you are full-time self-employed and not yet in a mastermind group, I want you to go right now to nextlevelmastermind.info. That's .info, not .com. So nextlevelmastermind.info, link in the show notes as well. Go and apply for the Next Level Mastermind today. We are looking to add a handful of positive mindset people who are willing to work together in a spirit of harmony towards all of us sharing our education, our experiences, our skills, talents, and abilities each week, where all of us are committed to the success of each and every person in the group, to having a thriving, profitable business that allows us to not only live the life we feel called to live when it comes to margin in our lives, in our personal life, our spiritual life, our professional life, but also that it gives us the financial ability to support our families in the way we feel called to do it, and to contribute to all the other things we feel called to contribute to in this world. This is not a group for people who are looking to just survive. This is for people who are looking to build a business that will help you live the life that you feel called to live in this world. That's the Next Level Mastermind, nextlevelmastermind.info. Until next time, I encourage you all to take everything you do to the next level.